A woman with short brown hair sits at a table, looking up with a hint of surprise. Her surprise turns to shock as she learns some sudden news from a calm, black-haired woman. The brown-haired woman beams, congratulating her friend on the wedding and praising her wonderful boyfriend. The black-haired woman smiles sweetly, confirming that she will be at the wedding. With a small rustle, the brown-haired woman holds a white, wax-sealed wedding invitation. Reading the invitation, she remarks on the coincidence that her husband's name is the same, prompting loud laughter from her friend. The black-haired woman leans back confidently, telling Biola that it's no coincidence. Biola asks what she means, and is shown a wedding photo of the woman kissing her own husband, sparking horrified realization. The woman reveals they're marrying on their 6-year anniversary, as Biola's world darkens and her hand trembles, crushing the invitation. Revealing she is pregnant with Do-yoon's child, the woman demands congratulations, but Biola erupts in fury, calling her insane as a chair crashes down. Biola questions her humanity while a dark-haired man, Do-hyun, coldly refuses to grant her a divorce. Overwhelmed by betrayal, Biola breaks down in tears as a voice tells her to get a grip. The woman cruelly reveals she is legally married to Do-yoon, making Biola the mistress, and mocks her for believing he would ever register their marriage. A horrifying truth echoes in Biola's mind. He never loved her from the start, as she is consumed by despair. The woman coldly demands Biola get out of their lives, leaving her sobbing on the floor among scattered papers. As the woman walks away, Biola is left with the crushing realization that her life was a lie. Time becomes a blur for Biola. She quit her job and left everything behind after the incident. Hiding from the world, she distanced herself from everyone she knew. For 3 years, she has been running from that devastating moment, hiding in a lonely room. Resolving not to live in despair, she compares her tragic life to the heroine of a novel, The Countess of Elgrin. The novel tells the story of Count Eric's affairs and his wife Ross, who silently endures his cruelty. In her solitude, she read novels like this to escape the pain of her past. Suddenly, her apartment door bursts open and the ceiling collapses, causing her to scream in terror. As debris rains down, she desperately cries out for someone to save her. Trapped and terrified, she looks up, pleading for anyone to help. As blood splatters, she thinks that while she wished the world would end, this wasn't the ending she wanted. The scene shifts to a grand, sunlit mansion in a different world. A man in a formal vest accepts blame, as a doctor reports that a woman's fragile condition was worsened by a great shock. The doctor happily declares she's otherwise healthy, but bang! A sudden force interrupts him. With a whoosh, the doctor is sent flying across the opulent room. The doctor, now a tiny figure, complains about quitting his job as a pink-haired woman begins to stir. He rushes to her side, asking if Lady Wentz is all right, but she only looks at her hand in confusion. The newly awakened pink-haired woman stares at her own unfamiliar hands with wide, shocked eyes. The weeping doctor urges the madam not to strain her weak body as she looks down, utterly bewildered. An ornate frame introduces Ross Wentz, the only daughter of a fallen count family. The narration explains that Ross foolishly turned her back on her family to be with their mortal enemy, Eric. Over the doctor's concerned cries, she screams in denial, insisting she can't be Ross Wentz and that this must be a dream. Realizing this is no fairy tale, her past self recoils in horror at the thought of living such a painful life again. Her memory of dying under rubble surfaces as she thinks she'd rather have died than endure this. Tusk, a shirtless, black-haired man, leans over her, coldly asking if she's finally regained her senses. Waking in a daze, Roz apologizes, explaining she must have dozed off and was told to rest because it was that time of the month. The man scoffs at her excuse, cruelly reminding her that she actually collapsed from a miscarriage. Her eyes widen in pure shock as the devastating word echoes in her mind. Miscarriage. She realizes this must be the moment the original Ross remembered her past, and she internally fumes at the shameless man who offered no apology. He dismisses her grief, callously trying to initiate sex, and lamenting how long it took her to get pregnant only to miscarry. "No!" she screams, appalled by his actions right after his wife's miscarriage, and begs him to leave until she recovers. He grabs her throat, snarling that she's misunderstanding something. He coldly warns her to stay out of his affairs from now on, leaving her coughing and defeated. With a cruel smirk, the shirtless, black-haired man warns her not to forget what happened, sarcastically questioning if even an idiot can manage that. Slam! As the door closes, the pink-haired woman sits up in bed, clutching her throat in fear and distress. She thrashes in bed, internally screaming that she can't live with that trash Eric, and cursing the original Roz and the author of this crazy story. Outside the grand mansion, she wonders how this could even be possible. Now dressed, Roz looks out the window, wishing she had just one person to help her. Elsewhere, a group of maids gangs up on another, yelling at her for slacking off while they do her work, and demanding she get to it as she begs to be let go. Roz peeks through the window, wondering about the commotion as a brown-haired maid apologizes, explaining that a maid named Doana has been unstable lately. The blonde maid, Doana, furiously wishes she had her phone to film the others and sue them. The defiant blonde maid is brought before someone, announcing she has arrived as ordered. Roz sits peacefully, a gentle smile on her face. The blonde maid reacts in shock as Roz shushes her, realizing they are both trapped inside the novel together. Roz explains she's been confused ever since waking up, prompting the blonde maid to excitedly ask about the X-Dong incident, revealing she had an accident there too. The blonde maid is delighted they are together in this new world and proposes that they become friends. Roz considers this, thinking that perhaps meeting here is a lucky connection. As the two women walk together arm in arm, a thought emerges that being with Doana could change things. In a dark moment of reflection, Roz remembers her past life name, Lee Gyoru, given to her by her mother so she would never lose. The blonde woman smiles, asking Roz to remember the name Gyoru and suggesting they get along from now on. A painful memory surfaces for Roz of a brown-haired woman, her friend of 10 years, juxtaposed with the blonde maid's smiling, outstretched hand. The memory crystallizes. Her longtime friend of 10 years was the one who stole her husband. Back in the present, Roz compliments the lovely name Gyoru while pouring tea, but internally notes its rarity, still uncertain. Trying to confirm her suspicions, Roz asks the blonde maid, Gyoru, how old she is. Gyoru tearfully replies that she is 29, lamenting how unfair it is that she got married so young. Roz's expression hardens as she realizes this is definitely the same Gyoru, the one person she never wanted to see again, not even in death. Gyoru smirks, asking if they're the same age, and then demanding to know Roz's name. Roz gives a fake name, Kim Hana, which Gyoru finds unfamiliar, while Roz thinks to herself that it's her new identity. Roz recalls that because of Gyoru, she had to abandon her real name of over 20 years, Kim Byolha, remembering how quiet and friendless she used to be. Gyoru laments the cruelty of their past life grudge following them, then smoothly says Roz reminds her of a friend, making it nice to meet her. With a cruel smirk, Gyoru taunts her, recalling how pathetic Kim Byolha was on that day, able to do nothing but cry. Feigning ignorance, Gyoru asks Roz to explain the plot of the novel, claiming she knows nothing. Roz reflects that she would have innocently helped in the past, but now decides there's no need to tell her rival it's a tragic novel. With a cold smile, Roz informs her she's just a nameless extra, leaving Gyoru stunned and demanding to know who the main character is. Roz simply offers a serene, knowing smile in response. Gyoru points in disbelief, asking if Roz is the main character, and Roz calmly confirms that's how it turned out. Gyoru internally seethes, judging Roz's appearance as tacky and insisting she looks far better, believing she could have styled herself better. Dismissing Roz as the heroine, Gyro asks about Count Wen's, assuming the male lead must be predictable. Roz explains the plot. She fell for the handsome Count Eric at first sight and pursued him relentlessly. Gyoru scoffs, claiming she hasn't seen anyone particularly good-looking around the mansion. Roz assures her she'll understand when she sees him, admitting he's a bit cold to her, which piques Gyoru's curiosity. Internally, Roz sees through Gyoru's pretense of comfort, but deludes herself into believing her husband cares for her deeply, despite his coldness. Suddenly, Count Eric appears, looking weary and complaining that he hasn't slept due to work. Gyoru gasps in shock, covering her mouth as she sees the handsome Count for the first time. With a smile, Roz formally introduces the man as her husband, Count Eric de Wenz. Gyoru's eyes widen with a flash of greedy realization. Roz recognizes Gyoru's old habit of taking what's hers and offers her one last chance, wondering if she should intervene before Gyoru ruins her life by pursuing Eric. Gyoru gracefully curtsies, introducing herself to the Count with a polite, "It's a pleasure to meet you." She introduces herself as Doana, a close friend of Roz, prompting a surprised look from Eric. As Gyoru claims they were childhood friends who had forgotten each other, Roz grimly narrates that Gyoru is the one sealing her own tragic fate. Gyoru immediately begins to flirt with the Count, telling him she's heard he's an amazing man, and it's true, making him blush. Her mind races as she assesses his handsome face, fit body, and vast wealth, concluding he was practically prepared just for her. Gyoru turns to Roz with a smug smile, asking if she isn't better suited to be the Countess, declaring that the world revolves around her in this life and the last. As Gyoru clings to Eric, Ross places her foot on the table and announces she's not feeling well and will be heading in first. As Ross walks away, a man cries out for the madam while another calls her name. Rose! Roz wonders why her rival, Gyoru, had to fall into this novel with her, recalling that she thought she'd never see her again, but decides that letting the two of them be together might be for the best, as she resolves to escape this place. Okay. Roz laughs, realizing that fate wants her to get rid of two pieces of trash at once. Leaning back with a confident smile, she vows that she won't be a pushover like she was before. Roz recalls the original story, remembering that she was the daughter of a fallen noble family because she had begged to marry Eric. She remembers how her parents cut ties with her, leaving her to kneel before Eric alone. Because of this, the novel has little information about her family, and she suspects they would turn her away even if she found them. She closes her eyes in despair, realizing that if she gets a divorce, she'll likely end up homeless. Slam! She slams her hand down, shouting that she can't let that happen and will get divorced to live an amazing life. With new resolve, she decides that to survive in this world, she needs information and must begin studying immediately. Roz opens a door to find two maids, politely asking for a moment of their time as one asks how she can help. She requests to see the butler, and a maid confirms she is asking for Mr. Gwen. While sipping tea, Roz confirms to the butler, Mr. Gwen, that she is indeed asking for a tutor. The butler politely asks the madam for the reason behind her sudden request. Roz explains that, as the Countess, she feels obligated to understand how the world works, especially to enter high society. The butler muses on her past hardships, noting her newfound determination to look forward instead of relying on her husband. He agrees to speak to the Count on her behalf, much to Ross's relief, as she was worried she'd have to find a salon on her own. As Ross leaves, she notices the strange atmosphere among the servants, just as Gyoru's flirtatious voice echoes, "Oh, come on, Count, not in broad daylight." Realizing they're both the same after all, Ross scoffs at the sight of Gyoru and Eric together, knowing that woman wouldn't dare approach her anyway. With a determined gaze, she dismisses them, declaring that she is going to make a fresh start from now on. The scene shifts to a bright window framed by white roses, marking a quiet moment of transition. A shirtless Eric asks what she wanted, and the butler informs him that the madam requested a governess. Eric scoffs, remembering how she never lifted a finger when he previously told her to do something. The butler, ignoring Eric's attitude, asks what kind of teacher he should call from the list he's prepared. Eric coldly tells the butler to handle it himself and not to bother him with such matters, leaving the older man to accept his dismissal. Later, Eric lies with Gyoru, who playfully thanks him for letting her sleep in. Eric glares at the lingering butler, warning him to leave and stating that he doesn't share what's his. The flustered butler offers a hasty apology and quickly makes his exit. The heavy door closes, sealing the couple inside the room. Eric leans in to kiss Gyoru, asking if she's still not satisfied. Gyoru reflects on their night together, thinking that while no one's perfect, he was simply amazing. Elsewhere, Ross slams her papers in frustration, complaining about the immense amount of material she has to memorize for her very first lesson. Her lesson reveals that her family, the Count of Servial, was defeated in a power struggle and only survived thanks to Grand Duke Artyom before losing their power. Roz slumps in her chair, appalled that she was ignorant of this, and married Eric, the very man who ruined her family, realizing her parents must have found her pathetic. Her tutor continues, explaining that after the Emperor's death, the Crown Prince's uncle took the throne, which was for the best as the prince was a troublemaker. The tutor describes the Crown Prince as a ruthless man without compassion, warning Ross to never get involved with him. Ross recalls that the prince was executed in the novel, and while she doubts she'll ever meet him, she decides it's better to be careful. A maid arrives to announce that Ross's requested carriage is ready, reminding her of her plan to visit an auction and see Eric's gift. Internally scolding the original Ross for being an idiot, she forces a smile and agrees to leave quickly. On a snowy night, Ross stands outside a grand estate, her thoughts turning to a letter and a beautiful sapphire accessory. Flashes of memories and future events appear. Eric grabbing her, the sapphire jewelry shattering, and the blonde prince holding her close. Arriving at the auction, Ross spots the blonde-haired man from her history lessen the ruthless crown princess alone. Ross approaches the prince, taps on his chair, and informs him that he is sitting in her seat. The blonde man looks up with a sigh, questioning when the auction started having assigned seats. Suddenly, another man rushes to Ross's side, grabbing her arm in alarm and telling her to wait as she looks on in confusion at her bidding number, 38. The man leans in and whispers that her number is for bidding, not for a seat, and that she can sit wherever she likes. As the blonde prince watches, Roz freezes in embarrassment, realizing she just tried to kick someone out of their seat for no reason. The prince stands and walks away as the man with Ross apologizes for her mistake, explaining that she isn't used to places like this. Stunned, Ross flinches as the black-haired man grabs her. The man pulls her back, thinking he must smooth things over, as Ross offers a panicked apology to the stoic blonde man. Bowing deeply, Ross sincerely apologizes for her ignorance and begs for his forgiveness. Believing he won't cause a scene, Ross decides to quietly slip away while she has the chance. The blonde man suddenly commands her to sit, leaving Ross stunned and confused before he repeats the order more forcefully. Ross cringes at his tone, clearly unnerved by the unexpected command. She reluctantly agrees and sits beside him, deciding it's best to play invisible to avoid angering him further. The auctioneer hypes up the crowd, declaring that money is all that matters, and the highest bidder will win incredible treasures. The bidding begins as two nobles shout competing offers of 30 and 35 million res. Ross watches in amazement, realizing the nobles' wealth is on a completely different level as they casually spend vast fortunes. Wow. The auctioneer unveils a brilliant sapphire necklace, dramatically announcing it as Luna's tear. The crowd erupts in a bidding war as the price for the necklace skyrockets to 80 million res. Ross internally scoffs, remembering the necklace is a fake and recalling how Eric was berated after purchasing it. The blonde man calmly raises his paddle, number 30, and places a staggering bid of 100 million res. As the bids continue to climb at a dizzying pace, Ross grows panicked, exclaiming how fast the price is rising. Feeling a sense of dread, she decides she can't just sit back and watch, convinced it will lead to disaster. The blonde man prepares to raise his bid to 130 million. In a desperate move, Ross grabs his arm, shouting at him to stop and not buy the necklace. He asks what she's doing as she grips his hand, insisting that buying the item would be throwing money away. The blonde man looks down at her coldly, questioning what his spending has to do with her. Startled by his icy tone, Ross flinches back. She inwardly curses her meddlesome habit of acting on impulse. Composing herself, Roz confidently declares that the necklace is a fake, prompting the blonde man to question her knowledge and accuse her of insulting the nobility. She quickly clarifies that she isn't, suggesting the other nobles are likely unaware of the forgery themselves. The blonde man looks on skeptically, warning her that she will pay a heavy price for interfering if she's wrong. Suddenly, a voice calls out, "Countess Wentz," and Roz turns in shock, wondering how someone knew who she was. Thump! The auctioneer declares the Terror of Luna sold for an astonishing 3.6 billion less. A slight smile plays on the blonde man's lips as he looks at her, pondering his next move. Convinced she'll die if she doesn't do something, Roz frantically decides to bet her life on her claim. He questions her offer to bet her life, as she internally panics, realizing she meant to say her neck, not her entire life. Flustered, she quickly tries to take back her words, waving her hands in denial. The blonde man smiles, appreciating her sincerity as he reaches for her. Roz continues to stammer, trying to explain that wasn't what she meant. A voice in the crowd identifies the blonde man as Grand Duke Artium as he walks away. Later, Grand Duke Artium reflects on the auction, feeling that something is still fishy about the fake, and wondering if he should have ignored it. He decides that, if necessary, he can simply buy the real item from its new owner for a bit extra. An older woman recalls seeing Ross, realizing she is the spitting image of Lady Serviat. In a flashback, the woman remembers trying to get a young Ross to greet someone, but the small child refused, hiding behind her dress. A young blonde boy, the prince, is presented, but little Ross tearfully declares he is not the prince she imagined. The young prince stands silently as the little girl continues to insist that he isn't the real prince. Back in the present, Grand Duke Artium smiles at the memory, recalling how even when she cried, she still had a cute face. Meanwhile, Ross buries her face in her hands as a man calls out the name Cern. Cern asks a distraught Ross if she made a mistake with the Grand Duke, and she miserably agrees. Now identified as Escort Knight Cern, he smiles warmly and reassures Ross not to worry, vowing to protect her. Later, Roz asks Cern how a fake item could have made its way into the auction. She explains her theory. The host was deceived, and someone must have switched the real item with a counterfeit. Huh? Cern is completely shocked by her insight, and demands to know how she figured that out. Shiroz quickly places a finger on his lips to silence him. She claims she saw it in a dream, knowing the truth is unbelievable. Cern remains skeptical but accepts her excuse, privately wondering if she's alright as their carriage departs. The scene transitions to a grand, sunlit mansion surrounded by lush gardens and blooming flowers. At her desk, Ross quietly reviews documents when a cheerful voice calls out her name. A blonde maid leans over her shoulder, playfully asking what she is always staring at. Roz looks away with a sigh, dismissing the question by saying she is simply bored from doing nothing. The maid observes that it's not like anyone else in the manor keeps Roz company. She sympathetically suggests Roz must be lonely and wishes the Count were a bit kinder to her. The maid then notices Ross's earrings, complimenting them, and guessing they must be a gift from Eric. Roz brightly confirms they are a gift, prompting the maid to happily announce that she recently got a boyfriend. Roz's pleasant facade drops as she realizes the maid's smile isn't joy, but the smug look of superiority from someone secretly taking her husband. Snapping back to the present, Ross offers a flustered apology, claiming she just wanted a closer look at the maid's pretty earrings. The maid preens, smugly wondering how her boyfriend managed to pick earrings that suit her so perfectly. When Ross asks how they met, the maid leans in conspiratorially, claiming it was as if fate pulled them together. She closes her eyes blissfully, declaring that her boyfriend is absolutely perfect. In her private thoughts, the maid reveals she has a perfect plan to become the Countess, and will not fail in this lifetime. A flashback shows her past life, where she was disowned for stealing her mother's husband and came to regret her marriage. Revealed to be Gyoru, she believes being possessed into the novel is a divine chance to live up to her true potential, while Ross privately notes she must handle her own husband better. Ross smiles and thanks Gyoru for her concern, while a flashback reveals Gyoru once scorning a friend named Doana and her own past foolishness. Maintaining her smile, Ross internally wonders just how pathetic she must look right now. Their conversation is interrupted as the butler enters, announcing that a letter has arrived for her ladyship. Roz reads the letter with a puzzled expression, knowing she shouldn't have any connections in high society. Thwack. The letter is suddenly snatched right out of her hands. Yoru now holds the letter, her eyes wide with excitement as she wonders if it's a high society party invitation. After explaining what the invitation is, Roz coolly demands that Gyoru hand it over. Gyoru excitedly asks to come along, declaring it's what friends are for, but Roz simply offers a knowing, cynical smile. With a sweet but firm tone, Roz crushes Gyoru's hopes by stating that only nobles are allowed in, and maids can't enter. As Gyoru reels from the rejection, Ross twists the knife by asking if she'd like to attend as her personal maid, only to have the door slammed in her face. Gyoru seethes with rage as Ross feigns innocence, asking if she's upset and claiming she was only thinking of her. Roz holds the letter to her lips, repeating her insincere concern with a glint in her eyes. Gyoru forces a smile, denying she's upset while admitting to being a little disappointed, all while privately thinking Ross is infuriating. Maintaining her false smile, Gyoru notes that Ross is clearly angry and pointedly asks who sent the invitation. Ross's eyes widen in shock as she reads the sender's name, Grand Duke Artem, leaving her to wonder why he would contact her. She reflects that she and the Grand Duke never crossed paths in the original story, but now he's inviting her to his salon after their auction encounter. Ross realizes the invitation is addressed only to Countess Wentz, suspecting it must be about the fake Tears of Luna necklace. She recalls that another of the famed necklaces, gifted to the Empress, also turned out to be a fake, and assumes the Grand Duke must have heard the news. A wave of panic hits Ross as she remembers not only talking him out of buying the necklace, but also that he is fated to die soon. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, Ross decides to view the invitation as an opportunity to observe the social scene. Gyoru watches Ross's changing expressions, realizing she can't attend with her and refusing to go as a mere lackey. Undeterred, Gyoru thoughtfully schemes, convinced there must be another way for her to get into the party. FWAH. With a determined grin, she flings open the doors to Ross's wardrobe. Gyoru pulls out a light green dress, sneering that everything is tacky and vowing to replace it all when she becomes the Countess. Holding the dress against herself, she decides she'll just ask the Count to take her, as she'll have to meet society's elite eventually anyway. She poses, smiling brightly as she imagines how much better the dress looks on her. Digging deeper into a drawer for more treasures, Gyoru is surprised to find a tiny pair of baby shoes. She scoffs while holding one of the shoes, wondering why Ross would keep something so useless after her miscarriage. As a baby's cry echoes in her memory, Gyoru dismisses motherhood, thinking it wouldn't be so bad since nannies do all the work. Suddenly caught by Ross, Gyoru quickly fabricates an excuse, claiming she was just looking to borrow something to wear. Gyoru appeals to their friendship, saying they should help each other, while Ross internally admits she couldn't care less about losing old things. Suddenly, with a determined cry, Ross lunges forward and grabs Gyoru. "What is the meaning of this?" Gyoru shouts, as a flustered Ross apologizes but insists that she absolutely cannot have this one item. Roz looks down with tears in her eyes at a golden hairpiece she's reclaimed. Gyoru scoffs, dismissing the gift, and bragging that she's already received 3 from him, as she internally brands Ross as utterly charmless. Gyoru leans in conspiratorially, offering to ask the Count for the item on Ross's behalf and boasting that he might listen to her. A flashback reveals Gyoru in bed with the Count. She explains that as his personal maid, she spends more time with him than Ross does, and smugly claims he's actually a very affectionate person. Ross's hand clenches into a tight fist as she internally fumes, knowing Gyoru is a master at getting under her skin by highlighting the Count's coldness toward her. Making a hasty excuse that she left something in the study, Ross walks away, thinking to herself that the real Rose would have been devastated by Gyoru's words. As she departs, Ross coolly reflects that unfortunately for Gyoru, she is not the real Rose. The heavy, ornate doors of the study click shut behind her. Wiping a tear from her eye, Ross resolves to let Gyoru keep smiling and wanting everything she has. Entering the study, she discovers papers scattered chaotically across the floor. She sighs at the mess as she begins to gather the strewn documents. While organizing the papers, she wonders aloud if the wind blew them everywhere. A shocking passage reveals a plot to kill the Grand Duke in a definitive way that leaves no room for doubt, unlike the former emperor who was suspected of being poisoned. Reading on in horror, Ross discovers the plan is to use a recent incident to destroy Grand Duke Artem's reputation, so that no one will oppose his execution. She recoils in utter shock, dropping the papers as the terrifying words sink in. Collapsing to the floor in a panic, she realizes they're targeting the Grand Duke and frantically debates whether to warn him or save her own life. Bang! The doors are suddenly thrown open by a dark-haired man. The Count storms in, angrily demanding to know what Ross is doing in his study after being told by a girl named Doana. Thinking fast, Ross turns from an open window with a bright, innocent smile. She calmly explains she came for a book and found his papers scattered by the wind, all while telling herself to act natural. The Count eyes her suspiciously, noting her hurried demeanor and offering to help clean up, causing Ross to tense up. Whap! As he reaches for a document, Ross snatches it away, yelling at him to get his hand off. He furiously questions if she read the paper before demanding to know why she was in his study without permission. Though startled, Roz calmly lies that she has her private lessons in the study and came in without thinking. She continues her excuse about closing the window, and the Count internally concedes that he did tell her she could do as she pleased. Frustrated, the Count admits he was careless, but forbids her from ever entering the study again, letting her off with a warning. As Ross worries about her lessons, the Count tells her to rest her injured hand, and that he'll see her later before leaving. With a sigh of relief, Ross is left alone to ponder her next move concerning Grand Duke Artem. That evening, Roz and the Count sit at opposite ends of a long table, eating dinner in a tense silence. The Count glances thoughtfully at Ross from across the table. He proposes a trip together in a week, but Roz coldly asks why he doesn't take his mistress instead. Wondering if he's trying to apologize for hurting her hand, she declines the offer, stating she already has plans. The Count is baffled by her behavior, recalling how she always made a fuss about her birthday and wondering why she's pretending not to know about the trip he suggested. Roz explains that her plans involve an invitation she received from Grand Duke Artem. Clatter! The Count drops his fork in shock, demanding to know if the Grand Duke sent an invitation to her alone. He stares at her intently, repeating his question about the invitation being just for her. Roz confirms it's correct, looking puzzled by his intense reaction. He points accusingly, interrogating her about what kind of connection she could possibly have with the Grand Duke, whom she's never met. Internally annoyed, Ross waves it off as nothing major, explaining she met him at the auction while shopping for his gift. The Count is taken aback, finding it strange she'd buy him a gift after pretending not to know his birthday. He smugly concludes that she's just pretending not to care to get his attention and generously decides to let it slide. The Count mulls over the Grand Duke, inviting only Ross to a banquet, but ultimately decides the Duke's motives don't matter. With a charming smile, he suggests they go on their trip another time, announcing that he'd like to attend the Grand Duke's banquet as well. A sinister smile crosses his lips as he thinks of the party as a grand finale for the Duke. A flashback shows Gyoru walking down a hall, recalling how she only visited the Count a few times when she couldn't sleep. In the memory, the Count embraces Gyoru, telling her to find him when she needs to, while she privately scoffs at him being just a low-ranking knight. An irritated Gyoru shoves another maid aside, complaining that she's late for a summons. Gyoru, now identified as Doana, bursts into the Count's room, but he sternly chastises her for being late. Doana blames a sudden errand, but the Count reminds her she's assigned exclusively to him and shouldn't be doing anything else. Feigning innocence, Joanna says the Countess gave her the errand, asking how she could possibly disobey the lady of the house. The Count dismisses the topic of his wife, pulling Joanna into an embrace and telling her to do exactly as he says. Back in the present, 4 days before the banquet, Roz studies a list of nobles, wishing she had cameras to know their faces. Roz strategizes for her first society party, identifying Duchess Bella and Eric's mother, Tertia, as 2 people to watch, though she knows Tertia already dislikes her. Frustrated, she collapses onto her desk, lamenting over the secret document and wishing she were a clever protagonist who could easily solve such problems. The Count startles her from behind, remarking that she was so lost in thought she didn't even notice him walk in. As he reaches toward her with a gloved hand, she looks up at him with a startled expression. He pulls his hand back abruptly, clarifying that he wasn't reaching for her hand. Pointing at a gift on her desk, he demands she hand over the birthday present he knows she bought for him, leaving her to wonder why he's suddenly asking for it. Roz claims she couldn't prepare a gift, but the Count points to the box, calling her out on the lie. Slap. The Count grabs her arm in a rage, furious that she'd ignore his birthday yet prepare a gift for the Grand Duke, accusing her of disgracing the family name. Stunned, he holds his cheek where she slapped him and demands to know what she thinks she's doing. Roz passionately defends herself, explaining that she's ignored by society and simply wants to bring a thank you gift to the one person who invited her. Clutching the present to her chest, she reflects on how the original Rose struggled so desperately just to earn Eric's love. As their carriage rumbles along, they sit at opposite ends in a deeply uncomfortable silence. Resigned to the awkward ride, Roz prepares to step out of the carriage, only to trip on her own elaborate shoes. She panics as she falls forward, terrified of getting her dress dirty before she even arrives. She realizes with dread that if she falls, she'll have to go home and miss the banquet entirely. Just as she's about to hit the ground, a blonde man in a formal uniform catches her in his arms. Looking up, she's shocked to see Grand Duke Artem, who smiles and greets her as Countess Wentz. As she thanks him and he offers his arm as an escort, the Count suddenly appears, grabbing her hand and declaring that his wife doesn't need one. The Count pulls Ross to his side, accusingly telling the Grand Duke that his concern suggests an interest in his wife. With a firm grip, the Count seizes the Grand Duke's wrist, stopping him from reaching for Roz. The Grand Duke smiles coolly, replying that he's only offering help because the Count himself seems so uninterested. The Count roughly shoves Ross's injured hand, causing her to cry out in pain. The Grand Duke admonishes the Count for his cruelty, telling him he should show a little concern for his wife when she's clearly hurt. With a menacing look in his eye, the Count pulls Ross away, announcing he'll spend some quality time with his wife before they leave. The Grand Duke watches them go, thoughtfully suggesting the Count should tend to his other distinguished guests. Leaning in close, the Count whispers a threat, admitting he's playing the part of a gentleman, but would rather cut out the Duke's insolent tongue. He dismisses the Grand Duke as an immature cub, warning him not to draw attention to himself at the banquet. As the Count departs, the Grand Duke watches him leave, seething, "That pompous bastard!" The Count turns back and points commandingly at Ross, ordering her to return to the mansion and wait for him without making a scene. He walks off, abandoning her at the entrance, leaving her to wonder what she's supposed to do now. Standing forlornly beside an attendant, Roz can't believe she's been forced to enter the grand banquet hall all alone. As the announcer presents Countess Roge of House Wentz, she takes a deep breath and tells herself not to be nervous. A woman with brown hair holding a red fan smirks from the crowd, cattily remarking on Ross's arrival. Roz stands isolated as the cruel whispers of other guests surround her, questioning why she's there and judging her for having no pride. A stylized credit page briefly interrupts the story's flow. Walking through the sea of judging eyes, she finds that making friends is proving to be much more difficult than she had imagined. With determined steps, she walks across the grand hall, refusing to give up just yet. Approaching a refreshments table, she decides her first move is to get something to eat and wait for an opportunity to present itself. As she reaches for a drink, her eyes widen in surprise at something just out of view. Grand Duke Artem appears before her, holding out a glass of champagne with a gentle smile. He touches a pin on his uniform, a thoughtful expression on his face. Realizing he must have remembered her injury from earlier, she smiles gratefully and thanks him for catching her fall. He dismisses her thanks with a smile, but then asks a pointed question. How did she know the moon tear necklace was a fake? Roz frets, knowing she can't possibly admit the truth that she read about it in a novel. Thinking fast, she lies that she'd heard the real moon tear glows red under lights, and the auction piece didn't. surprising him with her simple reasoning. She tries to end the conversation by stating there's only one authentic necklace and asking him to just leave it at that. As music fills the hall, she decides she needs to escape before the situation becomes any more complicated. She curtsies and wishes the Duke a good evening, turning to make her exit. He stops her with an outstretched hand, asking her to dance with him before she leaves. Much to her surprise, looking around nervously, she desperately tries to think of a way out of the dance, wishing she could find Eric. A man with dark hair approaches Ross, asking if she's looking for her husband, before snidely adding that he's busy with another woman. Now dancing with Grand Duke Artem, she looks into his eyes and internally fumes that her husband is useless. The Grand Duke smiles charmingly as she internally frets about her lack of dance practice, having never learned in Korea. As he steadies her after a near fall, she looks up in surprise and wonders if he's being considerate. A romantic montage shows the two of them dancing gracefully, lost in the moment together. After the dance concludes, she curtsies politely, thanking the Duke for his time. Nearby, noble women gossip cruelly, mocking her clumsy dancing and questioning if she's even a proper debutante. As she walks away from the dance floor, the women continue to whisper that the Count must be exhausted by her. Thump! The Count suddenly grabs her arm, furiously demanding to know why she's dancing with the Duke instead of keeping a low profile. He continues his tirade, accusing her of desperately trying to get his attention with the dance. Her hand trembles as she realizes with dismay that he still sees her as a woman desperate for his affection. She glares at him with a look of defiance, the moment hanging in the tense air between them. He suddenly pulls her into a rough embrace, taunting that this is what she likes, while she internally recoils at his madness. Leaning in close, he smugly says he understands her frustration, asking if she missed him since it's been 3 weeks. Looking away in disgust, she makes the excuse that they've both had too much to drink. Declaring that she's going to rest, she turns to leave while the Count stares after her in shock. He yells, "Wait!" but she ignores him, hurrying away into the night. Running through the garden, she reflects that something feels off, as if he's been avoiding her lately. The Count watches her retreat, annoyed that things were getting interesting, while the maid Doana smirks from the background. He smirks to himself, deciding not to dwell on it, and to focus on his plans instead. Overcome with disgust, she sits on a bench when suddenly she gasps for air, choking and crying for help. She collapses, hearing a dying sound and frantically trying to move, wondering if this is her tragic novel fate. Her vision darkens as she panics, determined not to let her second life end so senselessly. Grand Duke Artem steps out from the shadows, cautiously calling out to her. He rushes to her side, his hand covered in blood, asking if she's okay as she wonders if he killed someone. He pulls back his blood-stained hand, acknowledging it's bad manners to offer it to her. She looks at him with suspicion, bluntly accusing him of having killed someone. The Grand Duke is amused by her accusation, while she explains that she heard a scream. He stands coolly, reflecting that a death at his own party would only harm his reputation. Looking at his bloody hand, he concedes that his appearance understandably led to her conclusion. With a reassuring smile, he invites her to come with him so he can show her the truth. He leads her to a clearing littered with bloodstains, where she asks him what happened. He explains that he just saved Marquise Bled, who was being attacked by a monster. A flashback shows him fighting a vicious beast as he explains the blood splattered on him, and that the creature fled when he heard her. Just then, guards arrive, with their leader shouting that the Duke is a murderer and ordering his arrest. An older man, Duke Felice, emerges with a smug look, declaring he knew Duke Arthium would go too far one day. Duke Felice condemns him for killing a close friend of His Majesty, as Duke Artem listens with a grim expression. Duke Artem's eyes narrow, as he realizes the entire situation was a deliberate trap. He instinctively steps in front of Roz, shielding her as the guards close in. Stepping forward with newfound resolve, Roz prepares to speak in his defense. Duke Felice points an accusing finger, demanding to know what right she has to interfere. Roz boldly addresses the crowd, declaring that she witnessed the Duke saving Marquis Bled from a monster. What? Duke Felice is completely stunned, stammering in disbelief that there was a witness. Onlookers whisper in confusion, having only gathered because they heard something had happened to the Duke. Duke Felice eyes Ross suspiciously, questioning why she was out in the garden with the Duke instead of at the banquet. He gestures to her dirty dress, confident that she'll back down to protect her husband's reputation. Roz realizes he's trying to discredit her and dismiss her, along with the accused Duke. Feigning distress, she covers her face in sobs, claiming she got lost in the garden after coming out with her husband. In a dramatic retelling, she explains a monster appeared and the Duke saved her, claiming she'd be dead otherwise, prompting a furious Duke Felice to demand where the monster went. Duke Artem stammers an excuse, claiming the monster disappeared while he went to fetch help for the Marquis. Roz covers her mouth, hiding a sly, triumphant smile. The Duke stifles a laugh, clearly amused by her quick-witted performance. In a furious flashback, Duke Felice curses his men, revealing he'd ordered them to leave no witnesses. As the crowd murmurs their belief in the Duke's innocence, a sweating Duke Felice panics, wondering how to deal with this unexpected monster twist. Duke Felice formally thanks Roz, who internally recalls that he's a powerful and ruthless figure who will eventually betray her family. Suspecting her own husband is the true culprit, Roz pointedly asks Duke Felice to give her regards to Count Wentz. In the quiet garden, she reflects that while they survived the immediate crisis, the danger is far from over. Annoyed, Roz wonders why Grand Duke Artem is still following her as she tries to walk away. Ugh. She stops abruptly on the garden path, her patience wearing thin. He leans in close, telling the startled Roz that he's just curious about her. He asks why she chose to believe and help him when she could have simply walked away from the whole mess. She remembers his fearsome reputation, but also recalls that he, in turn, had shown faith in her. Touched by the memory, she smiles with genuine warmth. He listens intently as she explains her reasoning. She explains with a confident smile that she was simply returning the favor in her own way. Gently touching her cheek, he promises to grant any request she has, as she is the one who saved his life. She recoils in embarrassment, insisting that wasn't her motivation for helping him at all. Seizing the opportunity, she grabs his arm and desperately asks for his help in getting a divorce. The Duke is surprised by her request, though he privately acknowledges that her husband Eric is a terrible man. She explains with determination that she wants to correct her foolish mistakes and finally live her life differently. As he smirks playfully at her declaration, she insists that she is being completely serious. He takes her hand, agreeing that it's a wise decision that will surely please her parents. He asks about her connection to the Earl of Serviat, and she confirms they have a business relationship. Her expression becomes somber as she is lost in thought. She remembers how her parents had lovingly waited 3 long years for her return, despite the foolish choices she made. With a hopeful smile, she asks him to send word to her parents that she will visit them soon. He asks when she plans to file for divorce, and she firmly replies, as soon as possible. He explains that the divorce process is quite simple these days, requiring only signed papers, and muses that there's not much he can do to help. She looks up with an uncertain expression, realizing her path forward isn't so simple. In a surprising turn, she bows her head and asks if he could lend her some money. He bursts into laughter at her unpredictable request, while in the distance, her husband, the Count, watches them with a dark expression. A furious voice suddenly shouts, "Roz!" startling them both. The Count storms towards them, demanding to know what kind of mess she's making now. He threatens to leave without her, but seeing the mark on his neck and his disheveled shirt, Ross realizes exactly what he's been up to. Putting on a smile for the Duke, she says she has to go, but asks if they can continue their talk later. He agrees, promising to send someone to her family's estate soon to make arrangements. She panics, frantically waving her hands and pleading with him not to. Fearing her husband's obsessive jealousy, she decides it's safer if she makes contact with the Duke herself. Waving a quick goodbye, she runs off to catch up with her husband. Her voice echoes from the trees, calling out for Eric to wait for her. Grand Duke Artem watches her go, a serious and contemplative look on his face. He mulls over her strange request for money, wondering if she's serious or just finding an excuse to stay connected with him. Standing alone in the forest, he reflects on how unexpectedly she behaves, despite being so sharp. He recalls the chaotic scene, impressed that she remained calm and didn't even scream. Rustle. As he stands in thought, an attendant approaches from the darkness, announcing his presence. Noting his enemies are getting bolder, the Duke orders his man to clean everything up, leaving no loose ends. With a slight smile, he adds an order to have someone watch over the Countess, acknowledging that she saved his life. Later, back at his residence, the Duke looks completely drained and frustrated. A red-haired aide smirks while reporting a letter from the palace, but the Duke dismisses it, clearly waiting for a different message. The red-haired aide reports to the Grand Duke, stating that, aside from the letter, there is nothing else of note. When the Grand Duke asks about visitors, the aide reminds him he gave orders to turn everyone away, causing the Duke's eyes to widen in shock. He leans forward anxiously, asking if they actually turned people away because of his frustrated command. The aide reassures him that no one has come by, not even an ant. Elsewhere, a nervous Ross, disguised in a brown cloak and blonde wig, clasps her hands together anxiously. Standing outside a grand gate, she worries that the Grand Duke won't recognize her in her disguise and will throw her out. She gasps imagining an even worse outcome. In a frantic daydream, she imagines the Grand Duke yelling at her, throwing coins in her face, and telling her to get lost. Shaking off her fears, she decides she's come too far to turn back and calls out to the guards. A brown-haired guard approaches, demanding to know why she is loitering. She stammers that she's here to deliver an item to the Grand Duke on behalf of her master, surprising the guard. As she speaks with the guards at the gate, the Duke's red-haired aide appears, looking down at the scene. With a welcoming smile, the red-haired aide gestures for her to enter, saying, "This way, please." Now inside, Ross asks where the Grand Duke is, and the aide politely asks her to wait for a moment. The aide instructs a maid to bring tea for their guest, prompting Ross to think, "Wow." She internally remarks on how impressive he is to be a butler at such a young age, as he glances back with a slight smile. The aide informs her that the Grand Duke has been eagerly awaiting her arrival, leaving her to wonder why he was expecting her. As the aide offers her tea with a pleasant smile, Grand Duke Artem appears in the doorway behind him. The Grand Duke greets her with a warm smile, remarking that it's been a while and he thought he'd never hear from her again. Meanwhile, in a grand chamber, Duke Felice reflects on recent events, calling the outcome a shame. He laments that their plan to get rid of the Grand Duke failed, while another conspirator notes that Count Wentz has a fine wife. Two men murmur amongst themselves, with one criticizing Count Wentz for being unable to manage his own household. A man speculates the Count was with another woman, but an older nobleman silences him, demanding respect. After an apology, the older man assures his superior that it won't happen again. The subordinate reels back in pain after being disciplined, as his superior vows to have a firm word with him. The man in the dark coat clenches his fists, furious at the humiliation he suffered because of that wench. He fumes that he should have never allowed that damn Serbian woman into his house in the first place. Giving his subordinate a dark look, he issues an ultimatum: sort everything out within 1 month. Back in the Duke's residence, Ross sits on a sofa, having removed her cloak. The Grand Duke observes her, thinking to himself that, perhaps because of the wig, she resembles his pet dog, Finn. Noticing something about her hair, he reaches out to touch it, making her gasp in surprise. A memory surfaces of him affectionately petting his golden retriever, Finn. Removing the blonde wig to reveal her pink hair, Ross says it's fine while internally scoffing at the idea of resembling a dog. Composing herself, she presents him with a gift box before they continue their conversation. She explains with a smile that she had intended to give him the gift at the last banquet. Recalling the chaos of that night when she was held in his arms, she explains that things became too hectic, so she ended up keeping it. The Duke looks at the small box, surprised that she prepared a gift specifically for him. She offers to prepare something better if he isn't pleased, but he simply asks her, why? With a faint, curious smile, he begins to untie the ribbon on the gift box. He opens the box to reveal a beautiful and ornate topaz brooch. Examining the jewel, he thoughtfully notes that, while it's not a popular type of ornament, it is quite elegant. In a cute chibi form, she eagerly asks if he likes it. He pins the brooch to his vest, smiling as he asks how it looks. Stepping closer, she offers to fix it for him, gently adjusting its position. She asks him if he knows the meaning of topaz, to which he replies with a question of his own, wondering if it has one. Explaining that topaz protects life and health, she thinks about the novel's plot, where he is fated to die soon, and feels she cannot ignore it. The Grand Duke looks at her with a knowing, thoughtful expression. She states firmly that she doesn't want him to die, and that the brooch carries this sentiment. She privately worries if he'll believe her, knowing his death would divert suspicion from her. In a flashback, she reaches for him across scattered newspapers, determined to earn his trust and prevent his death. He hums in thought, a gentle smile on his face as he looks at her. He leans in closer, deducing that if she knows he's going to die, then she must also know how to prevent it, leaving her stunned. Grand Duke Artem smiles warmly, inviting her to begin her story. Tick-tock. In a flashback to that night, Roz stands by a window, anxiously awaiting the right time. Remembering her plan, she recalls telling her maid she'd be back before dinner, and pleading with the frightened girl Jane to pretend to be her while she was gone. The memory of Jane's worried face lingers. Her husband enters her chambers with medicine, commenting on her dreadful voice, causing Ross to panic internally, wondering why he's there, and fearing he'll find out she's gone. He sets the medicine aside and grabs her from behind, asking why she's surprised he came himself and suggesting they have some private time. He tightens his grip, menacingly asking if she has something she needs to say to him. Quack! He violently grabs her by the neck. He berates the disguised maid for the disgrace she's caused him, threatening to teach her a lesson as she realizes how lucky the real Roz is to be gone. Suddenly, a blonde woman enters, interrupting him to report an urgent matter. The Count looks annoyed at the timing. After the blonde woman insists the matter is serious, the Count calls his wife a disappointment and leaves, causing the terrified maid to collapse in relief. Alone and shaken, Jane prays for her lady's safe and quick return, terrified of what the Count will do if he discovers the ruse. Back in the present, Roz, dressed as a maid, tells the Grand Duke that their first step must be to shift public opinion. She points out that he's known as the Empire's butcher. Crash. Their conversation is interrupted as Finn the dog leaps up, knocking over a vase of flowers while an unseen person shouts Ross's name. The Grand Duke swiftly catches her, holding her close as flowers rain down around them. He asks if she's hurt, but she's more stunned to realize she's floating. In the background, his red-haired aide storms in, furious at his disobedient dog, Finn. The red-haired aide apologizes profusely, holding the happy dog and explaining that he suddenly ran out. Roz mentions to the Grand Duke that she felt her body lift off the ground when he caught her, causing the red-haired aide to freeze in absolute panic. She looks down at her wet apron with a pensive expression. She looks up in surprise as the shirtless Grand Duke drapes his coat over her, telling her he doesn't want her catching a cold. While Finn playfully climbs on him, the aide scolds the Grand Duke for using magic, but the Duke retorts, asking what else he should have done. Touched by his concern, Roz clutches the coat and decides it's better to accept his kindness. Now fully dressed again, the Grand Duke asks her to explain how his reputation is connected to a death sentence. Roz explains it's based on evidence, recalling the moment she saw a document in her husband's study detailing a plan to execute the Duke using his infamy as justification. She explains that even at the last banquet, the gathered crowd seemed to be waiting for the attack, suggesting it was all part of the plot. Deciding she lacks proof, she resolves not to mention the former Empress's involvement just yet. With a confident smile, she puts her hand on her heart and vows to make sure he survives. The Grand Duke reflects on her story, concluding she was hiding something, and that the more she knows, the more danger her proximity to Count Wentz puts her in. Glowing with gratitude, Ross thanks him, saying she feels she owes him her life yet again. He raises a hand to stop her, suggesting that instead, she give him a chance to repay her kindness. An awkward silence settles between them as they sit across from one another at the table. Sensing he's changing the subject, she decides not to push, and instead awkwardly brings up her request for divorce funds. Taking a sip of tea, the Grand Duke encourages her to state the amount she needs without any hesitation. Her eyes light up with hope as she asks if he really means it. He simply nods in confirmation while sipping his tea. He spits his tea everywhere when, in a cute chibi form, she enthusiastically asks for 10 billion res. With wide, earnest eyes, she clarifies that she's not asking for charity and promises she can pay every coin back. He stares at her, stunned into silence, as she seriously repeats her request. He considers the sum, thinking to himself that it's enough money to run an entire commercial district. She watches him with hopeful anticipation as he quietly contemplates her enormous request for 10 billion. She nervously admits it's a large amount, but he suddenly agrees to do it, causing her to shout in shock. She stares at him in utter disbelief, questioning if he's really going to lend her the money so easily. He agrees to lend her the money, but only on the condition that she answer one question for him. Leaning forward intently, he points a finger at her as he prepares to state his condition. In her imagination, she sees herself as a chic business owner, proudly announcing her plan to start a department store, which leaves the Duke momentarily speechless. Intrigued, he leans back with a slight smile and asks her to explain her plan in more detail. In a cute chibi fantasy, Roz acts as a teacher, explaining the concept of a department store to the Grand Duke. She clarifies that it's a place that gathers multiple shops under one roof for consumer convenience, to which the chibi Duke can only say, "Oh." Roz explains that currently, people must shop or hire help individually, but her department store will allow them to easily compete with existing markets. Revealing her business model, she declares that instead of charging rent, she will take a percentage of sales as commission. She continues, stating the store will feature upscale products sold at a 30 markup, focusing on luxury over direct quality management. The Grand Duke considers her plan, thinking to himself that higher prices and exclusivity are perfect for the show-off nobility. A symbolic handshake, adorned with fine jewelry, seals their business agreement. Winking confidently, Roz asks him if 10 billion res is a worthwhile investment. The Grand Duke smiles with satisfaction, arms crossed, having clearly made up his mind. The scene transitions to the exterior of a grand estate at nightfall, A hooded Roz peeks nervously from behind a hedge, having finally returned. She worries that her meeting took too long and hopes her maid Jane is safe, noting that the lights in the house are off. Whoosh! A hand suddenly grabs her shoulder from behind, causing her to gasp in terror. A black-haired man with red eyes silences her, and she recognizes him with a whisper. Cern. Cern swiftly lifts her into his arms, promising to be quiet and asking her to bear with him for a moment. Tap, tap. His feet land silently on a stone path as he carries her through the grounds. Once inside, still in his arms, Roz quietly asks Cern if anything happened while she was gone. In a flashback, a frightened maid clutches her own neck, silently begging for the madam not to be told that the master tried to strangle her. Cern, in uniform, recalls the event with concern, believing that Roz absolutely needs to know what happened. He continues to think that despite everything, the madam still cares for the master. Another maid pleads with Cern, arguing that Roz is barely holding herself together and the truth about her husband's attack would break her heart. Elsewhere, the blonde woman lies in bed with Count Wentz, gently asking if he's asleep. Annoyed, she glares at his sleeping face, thinking that his handsome looks are his only redeeming quality. She presses him about the banquet, pointing out that he and Roz haven't spoken or even eaten together in days. The blonde woman cruelly suggests Roz is tired of him, enraging the Count, who grabs her and vows he won't tolerate being spoken of that way. With a triumphant smirk, she listens as the Count declares he'll divorce Roz within the month, secretly delighting in the news. A blonde maid bursts into the room, urgently calling out Roz's name. Looking up from her paperwork, Roz calmly asks the maid, Doanna, what is it? Doanna leans in conspiratorially, asking if something is going on between her and the Count. With a placid smile, Roz dismisses her concern, saying the Count is just sulking and that she plans to talk to him soon. Doanna smirks, privately mocking Roz for thinking everything is fine, while her husband Eric is already planning their divorce. When Doanna mentions her own husband was never like that, Roz pauses, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Doanna gets lost in a flustered daydream about her kind husband from her previous life. Snapping back to the present, Doanna advises Roz to make the Count come to her first, a suggestion Roz quietly considers. Roz coolly replies that Doanna isn't exactly in a position to lecture her on such matters. Doanna feigns friendship, telling Roz she can always lean on her, but Roz continues writing, clearly burdened by the conversation. Internally, Roz scoffs at the offer, thinking that her relying on Doanna is exactly what the maid wants most. At another location, a carriage arrives, and an attendant greets the passenger as Lord Cedric, former Count. The stern-faced Lord Cedric emerges with a dark aura, demanding that Roz be brought to him immediately. The scene shifts to a bright, lavishly decorated study. Cedric de Wentz, Eric's father, confronts Roz, insulting her for her insolent tone and innocent face, which he says reminds him of her mother. Playing dumb, Roz claims she has no idea why he has appeared so suddenly, feigning confusion. Cedric loses his temper, shouting that if she can't support her husband, she should at least stop being a burden. He continues his tirade, telling her he's tired of being disappointed, and that her job is to keep Eric in line and be useful to the family. He berates her for taking a side in a politically sensitive situation, accusing her of lacking the dignity to remain neutral, but she knows his words are just, an excuse to scold her for siding with the Grand Duke at the banquet. Roz fantasizes about screaming back that his son is the real problem, and that she's getting a divorce, but she stifles the urge, knowing it would only complicate things. Composing herself, she bows her head and apologizes, admitting she wasn't thinking clearly. Cedric sneers, blaming her actions on her Serviette blood, as a menacing red aura surrounds Roz. Barely restraining her anger, Roz clenches her fists and thinks to herself that she should just punch him. Lord Cedric gives the red-haired man with an eye patch a piercing glare as they stand opposite each other. Cedric departs, warning the man that this was merely a warning and his next action won't be just words. Wham! Hearing the door slam, Roz wonders to herself if scolding her was the only reason he came. As they walk down the hall, Cedric asks the red-haired man if he's taken care of the assignment. The man confirms he left it in Roz's room as instructed, prompting a sinister smile from Cedric, who believes it will keep her quiet for a while. At another location, an attendant informs his master that someone is waiting for him inside the room. TSK, a red-haired man lies on a divan, thinking he needs to resolve this mess, while Jane stands nearby holding flowers. Jane peeks into the room, wondering who the visitor is, and her eyes widen in shock at what she sees. As an attendant announces his master's arrival, Jane is stunned to see Sir Cern has come to visit. A nobleman questions Cern about any unusual movements between Grand Duke Arthium and Roz, to which Cern reports there have been none. The nobleman gives Cern a suspicious, scrutinizing look. He presses further, asking if the two of them haven't met privately, which triggers Jane's memory of Doana questioning her. Panicked, Jane worries that Sir Cern will reveal Ross snuck out and debates whether she should intervene. As Jane eavesdrops anxiously, Cern firmly denies any such private meeting has occurred. In a flashback, a blonde woman details a plot to poison a cup for Princess Diana to offer the Grand Duke, which will frame him when she collapses. Cern listens, horrified, questioning if the Emperor would approve such a plan. The plan is confirmed to have the Emperor's approval, with the only condition being that the antidote works so the woman doesn't die. Back in the present, the nobleman sternly warns Cern to ensure the woman doesn't get involved with the Grand Duke. With a somber expression, Cern wishes his master safe travels. After the nobleman leaves, Cern turns to find Jane hiding behind crates and asks if she heard everything. Jane realizes why he's been helping her, and fearfully asks if he's there to silence her, but Cern remains quiet. With surprising calm, Jane says she wouldn't be afraid even if she were to die now. She tells Cern that the scariest thing is no longer being able to trust anyone. Cern calls out to Jane, but she turns her back on him, telling him never to say her name or look at her again. Clenching his fist, Cern resolves to do what's necessary for his lady's sake. The scene shifts to a few minutes prior, showing Ross's empty, slightly disheveled bedroom. The blonde maid, Doana, enters the room, muttering that she escaped to get away from the family drama. She discovers a set of luxury cosmetics with a note in the Count's handwriting, wondering if it's a gift for Roz. Doana grows suspicious, thinking the Count is having a secret affair while simultaneously planning a divorce. Annoyed, she decides to use the cosmetics herself, scoffing that Roz wouldn't appreciate them anyway. After applying some cream, she finds it doesn't seem to suit her skin. Doana looks into a mirror, but her reflection is faceless. Crash! The cream jar slips from her hand and shatters on the floor. Kia! A piercing scream erupts from behind the door, making someone wonder where it came from. Thump! Roz bursts through the doors, frantically asking what in the world happened. She stares in shock at Doana's face, now covered in hideous red blisters, exclaiming, "My God, your face, what the hell?" An advertisement for other comics is displayed. A doctor kneels to examine Doana's face, explaining to Ross and a butler that the blisters are caused by various poisons. Doana glares as the doctor informs her that, while the blisters will fade, he cannot guarantee there won't be scarring. Enraged, Doana grabs the doctor, accusing him of being in cahoots with Ross, just as Count Eric rushes in, calling her name. Doana throws herself into Eric's arms, crying and asking what she's supposed to do. Ross stands by, utterly confused by the scene, as the doctor nervously adjusts his monocle. Eric holds Doana, confused by her mention of a gift, and denying he would ever give her something like that. A dark look crosses Eric's face as he internally wonders if his father's recent visit is connected to this incident. Roz explains that since Doana insisted, she had all the cosmetics from her room brought out for inspection. Pointing to the collection of cosmetics, Roz challenges Doana to find the specific item she claims was a gift. Doana scrambles over to the bed and begins frantically searching through the items. After a frantic search, she turns around in dismay, realizing the cosmetic she's looking for isn't there. She panics, shouting that the cream jar with the gemstone in the Count's note is the only one missing. Doana points an accusatory finger at Ross, asking if she had someone throw it away, leaving Ross stunned. Doana accuses Ross of destroying the evidence, but the butler calmly refutes her, stating the madam would never do such a thing and that no such order was ever given. Doana internally seethes, wondering what kind of lowly maid would covet the madam's things, then recoils at being called a lowly maid herself. Sigh. Eric, pinching the bridge of his nose, declares that's enough, and says he will investigate the matter himself. The butler gently escorts a weary Ross away, assuring her he'll take care of everything, and she gratefully accepts his help. Crying, Doana wonders what horrible thing she did to deserve this, lamenting that all she did was use one cream. The butler sternly reminds Doana that the madam's kindness doesn't give her the right to act as if she owns the place. Doana scoffs internally, believing Ross is the one who doesn't know her place, and that she's only being merciful by not taking everything. As Doana tries to shout a rebuttal, she is suddenly cut short, her expression frozen in shock. The butler urgently yells for Doana to snap out of it as she appears to be in a daze. In Cedric's office, Eric reads a letter and realizes he's received the gift his father left behind. As he writes, Eric resolves to handle Ross himself, thinking there was no need for his father's extreme measures. Elsewhere, Cedric smirks contemptuously, dismissing his son as an arrogant little brat. A young man in a red uniform is ordered to find out who has the poisoned cream now. The butler asks the young man to handle the cleanup for the madam's sake, but the young man appears hesitant. The butler reflects on his 30 years serving Lord Cedric, recalling a time when his master was a sharp, admirable man. Now, seeing the vile schemes Cedric is involved in, the butler realizes his true priority must be protecting the suffering Roz. He looks at the young man, asking if he also serves the madam with a loyal heart. Looking resolved, the young man asks the butler to trust him and help him put a stop to the schemes. In another room, a doctor informs Eric that the blonde woman resting in bed will be fine after some rest. Wah! The blonde woman gleefully asks Eric if he heard the news, announcing that she's pregnant. Eric looks stunned by the news of a baby, while the woman celebrates and the doctor looks on nervously. Sob. The woman then tearfully claims that Sir Gwen tried to assault her while she was alone, and she collapsed after running away. The butler, Gwen, internally seethes at the false accusation, vowing not to let the woman get away with her lies. Eric scoffs, finding her story unbelievable, but then a sudden realization makes him pause. He takes her hands, promising to take care of Gwen and telling her to simply get some rest. She embraces him, declaring that he's the only one she can truly rely on. Gwen stands in disbelief, asking Eric what he's talking about. Stomp. Eric walks past him with cold determination. With a sinister smile, Eric decides he cannot simply let this matter go. Turning to the loyal butler, he delivers a stunning blow. You're fired. With heavy footsteps, Eric walks away from Gwen, thinking he can't let this slide, and declaring the butler is fired. A shocked Gwen stammers, asking what Eric means. Eric smirks, telling Gwen he has always admired his tight-lipped nature and his ability to feign ignorance or knowledge as needed. Eric connects Gwen's silence about the cosmetics to the assault allegation, stating he doesn't care whether Gwen actually laid a hand on Joanna or not. Stump. Eric walks off, telling Gwen the real problem is that his loyalty is to his father, not to him. He glares back, ordering Gwen to get out immediately or be dragged out. Roz worries after hearing Eric summoned Gwen, fearing the butler is in trouble for protecting her. A maid bursts into the room, urgently telling Roz that something terrible has happened. As Gwen stands alone in the pouring rain, the maid delivers the shocking news. The Count has dismissed the butler. Tipping his hat in the rain, Gwen thinks he has no regrets leaving a household that has changed so much for the worse. His only worry is for his gentle lady Roz, and whether she will be able to endure without him. Madam. Roz calls out, running into the rain without an umbrella, clearly distraught. Roz knows a dismissed servant has few options, and remembering his constant help, decides she must do something for him. Standing before him in the rain, she tells Gwen that even if he's not the head butler, she still needs him. With a bright, hopeful smile, Roz tells him about a business she has been planning. She recalls learning that Gwen and her mother's family were the ones who saved the Wen's household from ruin. Facing him, she asks if he would lend his skills to her cause once more. Seeing his surprise, Roz acknowledges that her request is sudden. She reassures him that he will always be welcome and tells him to contact her when he's ready, moving him with her sincerity. Smiling warmly, Gwen tips his hat in farewell, telling her he expects her to be a company president the next time they meet. From a window, Eric and the blonde woman watch the scene, with her remarking on the fuss being made over a simple goodbye. From a reflection, the blonde woman thinks she didn't expect him to fire Gwen so easily and feels satisfied that she chose the right man. Leaning in, the blonde woman cups Eric's face and tells him not to worry about such trifles, suggesting they finish what they were doing. She kisses him passionately, vowing to herself that she is never letting this man go. Back in her room, Roz gets dried off by a maid who says she was surprised to see her run out into the rain like that. Two other maids express their gratitude, with one tearfully thanking their lady, while the other says she feels much better now. Roz, her pink hair in a neat braid, kindly asks Jane to bring some tea to her room. Roz explains to Jane that her business plan must be kept secret for now, and Jane correctly guesses she is to pretend she knows nothing. When Jane asks if it's fine for CERN to know, Roz immediately and forcefully objects, startling both Jane and herself. Jane is flustered by the strange mood, imagining herself in a romantic scene with the young man in the red uniform. Just as Roz is about to explain something important, a knock at the door interrupts them. A maid announces that her lady's bath is ready, leaving Roz to wonder about the timing. The scene shifts to a luxurious bathtub, filled with shimmering water and delicate flower petals. In a white robe, Roz approaches the tub, confused by the flowers and wondering what's going on. Roz's expression turns to one of disgust as she thinks about how he was with another woman just moments ago. A painful memory surfaces of her past life husband, Lee Do-hyun, who would make love to other women and forget her without a second thought. Tearing up, she draws a parallel between her past and present, thinking how Do-hyun was her whole world, just as Eric is now Ross's. Eric suggests they move to the bed, but Ross recoils, telling him to get away. With tears in her eyes, she orders him to get his filthy body, which was just with another woman, away from her. Eric stands over her, asking if she even considers them husband and wife. Clutching her robe, Ross angrily retorts that he shouldn't have come to her while still carrying the traces of another woman. Eric looks back in anger and shock, realizing that the other woman must have revealed their affair. Bang! He slams the door on his way out, shouting that she can do as she pleases, but will be the one crawling back in regret. Alone and dripping, Roz wipes away a tear, frustrated with herself for crying over a man who isn't even her past love, and for being unable to forget the past. Overwhelmed by the suffocating atmosphere of the house, Ross stares into the distance and resolves to break free from it all. In the servants' quarters, a senior maid reminds the blonde woman that the madam is unwell, and that she's a personal maid to both the Count and Countess. The blonde woman smirks, announcing that she is pregnant with the Count's child. When the other maid expresses disbelief, the blonde woman laughs, insisting it's true, and that the Count himself confirmed it. Crack! As she advises the maid to take her side, a hand suddenly slaps her across the face, making her cry out in pain. The blonde woman, Doanna, looks up with cold resolve, pondering what this turn of events means for her future. Later, Doanna brings tea to Ross in bed, condescendingly asking why she keeps burdening others instead of taking care of herself. Doanna tells Ross to have other servants attend to her from now on, explaining that she herself must be careful now. Taking a sip of tea, Ross calmly asks if something is going on. With a radiant smile, surrounded by a floral background, Doanna happily reveals, "I'm pregnant." Roz realizes the situation is repeating itself, just like in her past life, and mentally asks Doanna who the father is. Doanna smugly informs Roz that the father promised he would handle things with his wife. Giddy with delight, Doanna adds that he plans to make her the Countess, not just his mistress. Doanna daydreams of becoming Countess Doanna, declaring that Roz will have to step aside so she can carve out her own place. Holding Ross's hands, Doanna justifies her actions by saying that a person's heart can't be stopped from straying. The two women sit on the bed together, Doanna smiling triumphantly while Roz looks on. Doanna thinks that while she hoped this marriage would be an escape, the wretched memories of her past life are fueling an anger inside her. Roz slams her cup down and asks if Doanna feels any guilt, prompting Doanna to angrily demand an apology for the rumors she had to endure. Doanna shouts that their marriage wasn't based on love, and that Roz has no right to be bitter when she just lucked into becoming a countess. Whack! Roz furiously slaps Doanna across the face. Holding her stinging cheek, Doanna stares back in disbelief, utterly stunned. Bang! A man who appears to be Eric bursts into the room, demanding to know what the commotion is about. Wah! Doanna immediately runs into his arms, crying out for her lord. Crying into his chest, Doanna falsely claims that the madam suddenly lashed out and struck her for no reason. Resting in bed, Ross caresses Eric's face and congratulates him, saying he'll finally be the father he always wanted to be. Eric holds Danya and sneers at Ross, calling her a vicious woman who is jealous because she lost her own child through her own carelessness. Ross snaps, screaming if he's insane, while memory shows a distraught older woman being comforted as narration condemns Eric's cruelty to Ross. Whack! Eric furiously throws a pillow, ordering both Ross and Danya to get out immediately. Looking stunned, Eric berates Ross for stepping out of line after he'd given her some slack. Holding a pillow defensively, Ross declares that if that's how it is, then they should get a divorce. As Eric comforts Danya, Ross watches with cold satisfaction, thinking she finally pushed him to demand a divorce first. Eric turns his back on Ross, telling Danya to ignore her as they leave. Surrounded by a floral background, Ross calmly agrees. Let's divorce. A confident smile spreads across her face as she decides she's tired of living with a philandering husband. Eric scoffs at her bold words, warning her not to take it back, but Ross firmly states she won't, and will leave the house right now. Thump! Alone now, Ross slams her teacup down, fuming that the more she thinks about it, the more infuriated she gets. Sipping her tea, she feels relief that Eric can't back out of the divorce, but then worries about having nowhere to go, picturing her parents' reaction. She laments that she even tried attending banquets to make connections for this exact situation, calling her husband useless. As she sips her tea, A blond man in an ornate blue cape quietly approaches her from behind. Startled, Ross looks up and exclaims, "D-Duke," as he asks what she was so lost in thought about that she didn't hear his greeting. With a gentle smile, Ross explains to the Duke that she has just left her husband's house. She begins to explain that she left for now, but her voice falters as she tears up. As Ross's head droops in distress, she wonders what she should do next. Crash! The teacup shatters as Ross faints, and the Duke catches her, frantically calling out her name. The Duke holds the unconscious Ross in his arms, calling out her name in alarm. He realizes her entire body is burning hot with a fever. The Duke resolves to take Ross to his estate for safety, worrying that if divorce rumors spread on top of past gossip, her reputation will be ruined. He looks down at her with a look of deep concern and resolve. He rushes toward a carriage, but a guard tries to stop him, stammering about her condition. The Duke gently hands Ross to another man, ordering him to take her to the Serviat residence at once. At the gate of a grand mansion, someone shouts that they can't just barge in. An elegant woman with pink hair is told there are strict orders to let no one in, but the visitor insists it is urgent. The pink-haired woman looks on with a serene expression, holding a single rose. She wonders about the commotion as the servant runs up, stammering that her lady must see who has arrived. She sees the Duke carrying Ross, who is bundled in his cape. The woman gasps in shock, crying out, "My heavens!" She drops her basket of flowers in horror, screaming Ross's name. Rushing to the Duke's side, she asks what happened, and he explains Ross has a high fever and needs to get inside. A stern-looking man with a beard appears, demanding to know the meaning of the commotion, and the woman calls him Damon. The man is identified as Count Serviat, Ross's father. Count Serviat sternly addresses the Duke for causing a fuss and bringing Ross to his doorstep. The Count reaches out to take his daughter from the Duke's arms. He carefully lifts Ross, then orders his staff to escort the Duke inside and immediately summon a physician. Later, Count Serviat sits anxiously by his unconscious daughter's bedside. Gently touching her forehead, he laments that she's a foolish girl for only returning after 3 years in such a state. The Duke comforts the Count, telling him not to worry, and that the physician says it's just a simple chill. Count Serviat looks up and thanks the Duke for his help. The Count then asks how this situation came about and why the Duke personally brought Ross to him. Recalling their conversation, the Duke remembers Ross telling him her divorce would soon be finalized, and he thinks he must be careful with his words. The Duke explains he found Ross alone at a salon, which prompts the Count to exclaim in shock that she was without even an attendant. With a serious expression, the Duke prepares to ask the Count a critical question. He looks Count Serviat in the eye and asks if he is prepared to stand by Ross, no matter what choice she makes. The Count recalls his daughter's misery, crying every night and avoiding society, while her husband behaved disgracefully. Reflecting on her wedding day, he concludes that if that was the path she chose for happiness, then he must support her now and is prepared to accept anything. Count Serviat tells the Duke that standing by one's child is what it means to be a parent. The Count decides they will listen to Ross's story little by little once she wakes up. In her bed, Ross's purple eyes flutter open as she regains consciousness. Her parents rush to her side, and Count Serviat cries out her name as she sits up. Confused, Ross wonders where she is, remembering she collapsed while with the Duke. Her mother tears up, noting Ross has the same hair color and a similar face to her own. Wah! The woman embraces Ross tightly, crying out and asking what in the world happened to her. Ross hugs her back, downplaying her situation as a small issue with her husband so as not to worry them. A memory surfaces of her past life parents worrying over her after she broke an engagement and locked herself away for a month, begging their precious star to tell them what was wrong. Determined not to disappoint anyone again, she tells her mother it's nothing serious enough to trouble them with. Count Serviat joins the embrace, holding his wife and daughter in a tight, comforting hug. Feeling her father's warmth, Ross is reminded of her parents from her past life and decides to finally tell them everything. Sobbing like a child in her father's arms, she listens as her parents apologize for not seeing her suffering. Outside, the Duke asks a man if his conversation went well, and the man confidently confirms it did. A flashback shows the Duke ordering the man to take Ross to the Serviat residence, despite the man's surprise that she has been estranged for 3 years. The Duke simply smiles, dismissing the man's concerns about her estrangement. In his thoughts, surrounded by roses, the Duke confidently reflects that her parents would never turn her away. Elsewhere, in an opulent room, a voice shouts in disbelief, "What? Divorce?" A man with dark hair laughs while reading divorce papers, commenting that For once, Eric handled things quickly by filing with the temple. He wonders why his aide, Cern, failed to report something so important. An aide nervously explains there's a problem, and the man's expression darkens as he demands to know what it is. The aide reveals that a rumor is spreading among the servants that Count Eric has a child. The man crushes the papers, furious that Eric would cause such a mess right before the divorce, especially since the child isn't Ross's. The truth is revealed. The child belongs to a maid named Dawana. Slam! Enraged, the man slams his fist on the desk and shouts for the maid to be dragged before him at once. He seethes with anger that not only is someone pregnant, but it's a maid's child. Kicking his aide to the floor, he rants about how Eric ruined everything when he could have just divorced and found a proper match. As he laments that the rumor is likely everywhere, a red-haired woman named Tertia appears. Tertia calmly shushes him, telling him he's getting too worked up. She warns that his relationship with Eric is already strained, and killing the maid would destroy it beyond repair. He angrily asks if he's supposed to just watch a maid become the lady of the house, but she coolly replies, of course not. Tertia reveals she's already arranged for Eric to remarry the daughter of the Marquis of Dykard right after the divorce, leaving the man confused about why she chose a useless family. His eyes widen as he instantly understands her plan. Tertia laughs, calling him a genius and explaining the Dykard family is desperate enough to accept a concubine. Having settled on a plan, the man points decisively at his aide. He orders a letter be sent to the Marquis of Dykard immediately, demanding the wedding date be as soon as possible. At another estate, a voice wonders if a letter is truly from the Wen's family. A red-haired woman at a desk notes that the Wen's family is pushing for a wedding right after the divorce, suspecting they have their reasons. A man identified as Marquis Dykard sips his drink in disgust at their behavior, while his daughter, Belliard Dykard, insists they have no choice. A flashback shows that with the empire in decline, their faction must forge ties with nobles under Duke Fleesh, forcing them to cater to others' whims. The Marquis slams his fist on the table, enraged at the idea of being forced to accept the Wentz scoundrel son. A knock sounds as a servant announces that she has brought the person they requested. A nervous young woman with short red hair enters, asking if she was summoned, while Belliard watches her from the doorway. Belliard stands beside her father, commenting on the striking resemblance between herself and the newcomer, saying it's odd they aren't twins. Belliard asks the young woman, Emily, if it's true she had a younger sister who went missing 5 years ago. Emily gasps, eagerly asking if Belliard knows something about her, and Belliard says she might even arrange a meeting. Overjoyed, Emily thanks her profusely, but Belliard stops her, stating there is one condition. With a sly smile, Belliard produces a small, sharp knife. As Emily screams, Belliard swiftly cuts a lock of her own long, red hair. Now with a shorter hairstyle mirroring Emily's, Belliard reassures her it's fine and asks her father if they now look identical, leaving Emily utterly bewildered. Belliard leans in close to a terrified Emily, reminding her there's a reason she freed her from prison and gave her a comfortable life. In a crimson-tinged memory, Belliard tells Emily she must perfectly impersonate Lady Belliard in exchange for being reunited with her long-lost sister. With her eyes squeezed shut, Emily makes her difficult decision. In the darkness, Emily's voice echoes her reluctant agreement to the plan. Elsewhere, a blonde woman in a mauve dress admires herself in a mirror, deciding the gown is acceptable. She carelessly tosses a yellow dress to a brown-haired maid, ordering her to burn the shabby thing. The blonde woman scoffs at the idea of wearing a cheap dress Ross ordered, vowing to have something worthy of her elegance made instead. Pointing to a pair of ornate shoes on the floor, she orders them to be thrown out as well, ignoring the maid's protest that they are wedding gifts. The maid looks down sadly, holding the dress as the blonde woman sarcastically asks if she needs everything spelled out for her. The woman cruelly insults the maid, asking if she caught Ross's stupidity by being around her. With a final, impatient command, the blonde woman orders the maid to clear everything away at once. Alone in the hall, the maid clutches her head in distress, worrying about where Ross is and lamenting her sudden departure. A man in a red uniform approaches, calling out to Jane and asking if she is all right. Startled, Jane recognizes Cern, who explains he heard a noise while passing by and says he must be going. As Jane turns away, Cern reaches out, calling her name to stop her. Jane angrily calls him a traitor, accusing him of driving her lady away just as Sir Cedric wanted. Cern silently presses a folded letter into her hand. Shocked, Jane looks at the letter as Serene explains that their lady left it for them in her room. Jane questions why Ross would leave him a letter, and Serene admits it was just words of thanks, adding he regrets not telling her something sooner. Cern looks down remorsefully, asking Jane if she realizes the depth of her betrayal against someone who trusted her completely. Jane remembers a happy day in the garden with Ross, reflecting on how sincerely her lady cared for them. She explains she hid the letter from everyone, intending to give it to him personally so it wouldn't be destroyed. With a determined gaze, Jane tells him she did it, even if it meant earning his resentment. Cern looks down, silently absorbing her words as her explanation concludes. Overwhelmed with sorrow, Jane clutches the letter and dress, crying out for her lady and wondering what she should do now. Back in her room, the blonde woman waits impatiently, wondering why the maid has been gone so long, just to throw away some clothes. As the door opens, she decides she'll give the maid a proper scolding upon her return. She jumps to her feet and yells into the doorway, demanding to know what's taking so long. Still yelling, she wonders how the maid could be so slow at such an easy job. An elegant red-haired woman in a purple gown appears, identifying the blonde woman as the maid carrying her son's child. The blonde woman flinches in shock, realizing this must be Eric's mother. Frightened, she worries that the woman has come to cast her aside. The red-haired woman drops her fan on the floor with a clatter, apologizing for startling her. She then steps behind the blonde woman, embracing her warmly. Tearing up, she explains that she came herself because her foolish son never introduced them. Holding the blonde woman's hands, she smiles kindly and asks for her understanding, to which the woman stammers in agreement, calling her mother. The scene shifts to a luxurious room as the red-haired woman offers a proper greeting. Standing beside Eric on the sofa, the blonde woman formally introduces herself as Doana. Eric looks away with a sigh, expressing his disgust at watching the two of them together. He eyes his mother and Doana suspiciously, asking what scheme she is planning this time. His mother feigns offense, claiming to be thrilled about her grandchild, but Eric retorts that she didn't act this way when Ross was pregnant. Changing the subject, the red-haired woman gently touches the bandage on Doana's face, asking how she was injured. Doana hesitates before blaming Ross for her injury. In a dramatic flashback, Doana falsely claims Ross attacked her out of jealousy, causing the red-haired woman to react with shock. The woman's expression hardens as she thinks about Ross and Eric. Watching Doana lean against her son, she internally seethes, convinced the sly vixen Ross has her claws in him. An older man with black hair comments that Ross was always strange, suggesting she takes after her mother. He continues his critique, stating that Ross's mother was only good at beguiling men. The man tells Doana and Eric to ignore everything else and focus on their wedding. He then stands and declares the wedding will proceed within the next few days, leaving Eric utterly stunned. The red-haired woman insists on proceeding with the wedding quickly, wanting to get the bride fitted before her belly grows too round. Overjoyed, Doana calls the woman mother, who reveals she's already brought a designer for measurements. Eric rubs his head in frustration, thinking his family acted too rashly by showing up right after the divorce as his mother bids him farewell. As they leave, the red-haired woman waves goodbye, saying she'll see Eric again at the wedding. Thud! The doors close, leaving Doana to exclaim in delight. Doana clasps her hands together happily, thinking to herself that Eric's mother has clearly taken a liking to her. She clings to an annoyed Eric's arm, boasting that she has now captured his mother's heart as well as his. Eric dismisses her excitement about the wedding, stating they aren't as big a deal as people make them out to be. Insulted, Doana gestures to his wedding portrait with Ross, asking if they shouldn't take it down right away. Eric grabs her hand, telling her there's no need to rush and that he will handle the portraits himself. Doana angrily pulls her hand away, demanding to know why he has such a lukewarm attitude about removing the portraits. An aide interrupts them, and Eric turns to see who has arrived. A woman in a purple jacket introduces herself as Mona, the chief designer of Moni Blanc, presenting a white gown. Doana acknowledges that the designer was sent by Lady Terja to prepare their wedding outfits. After inspecting the dress, Doana criticizes it as, quote, awfully plain, prompting a shocked protest from the designer. Doana haughtily declares that as the star of the ceremony, her dress must be more dazzling than anyone else's. When the designer cautions that too much is never a good thing, Doana silently fumes, angry that a lowly maid would dare lecture her. She smiles menacingly, ordering the designer to make her the most splendid, glittering gown imaginable. With a cruel smirk, she adds that the dress must be incomparable to the one his ex-wife wore. A few days later at the Serviat estate, a voice from off-screen asks what has been brought back. Ross descends the stairs, wondering aloud what is happening so early in the morning. She sees two people on the landing, one of whom holds a letter and explains She had to accept it because everyone was acting so awkward. The woman decides not to tell Ross about the letter, but Ross has already seen them. The woman holding the letter recognizes the crest, realizing with shock that it must be Eric's wedding invitation. Roz calmly continues down the stairs, stating that she's fine and already knew Eric was remarrying, surprising the others. She holds out her hand for the invitation, asking to see it for a moment. Looking at the invitation, Roz remarks that the timing is sooner than she thought, guessing they're rushing due to Joanna's pregnancy. Her eyes widen in shock as she reads the invitation more closely. She realizes with stunned confusion that the bride's name on the invitation isn't Joanna. In a library elsewhere, a voice asks if the wedding preparations are proceeding smoothly. Tertia fans herself, boasting that she's taken care of everything so that all the children have to do is walk into the hall. Just as she reflects on the impending marriage, an aide bursts in, shouting that a disaster has struck for Lord Cedric. Cedric, the man with the eye patch, demands to know what the aide means, who reports that Sir Cern was asking about Lord Gwen's successor. Confused, Cedric repeats the word successor, asking what nonsense the aide is talking about. The aide nervously explains that Lord Gwen has left the household because Count Eric personally expelled him. The older man furiously throws down his cane, enraged that Eric would dare cast out the loyal Gwen. He orders Eric to be brought before him at once, while in another room, Eric wonders why he's being bothered during wedding preparations. Eric's father confronts him, screaming that in the 3 years since becoming Count, Eric has not once satisfied him. Tiesk. Eric sighs in frustration, thinking there's a limit to his father's foolishness. His father demands to know why Eric threw Gwen out, accusingly asking if he even knows who has been cleaning up his messes. Eric insists he had a good reason for the dismissal, but his father angrily dismisses it as something petty. In a flashback, the father lectures a younger Eric about Gwen's 30 years of devotion, advising him to listen to wiser men if he's a fool. While his father declares that nothing will go Eric's way, Eric retorts that he will marry the one he chooses, unlike his father. Enraged, his father scoffs at the idea of a low-born woman from the gutter, while Eric thinks that her status won't matter when she's the countess. The father crushes a letter, furiously shouting that he never accepted that wench as his daughter-in-law. He shoves the letter at Eric, commanding him to marry the Marquess of Descartes' youngest daughter, leaving Eric completely stunned. Eric angrily tells his father to stop, asserting his authority as the Count to make his own decisions. His father laughs mockingly, saying he's putting a stop to Eric's stupid doll-playing nonsense. With a final roar of fury, the father strikes Eric, screaming that his defiance will be his end. Lying bleeding on the floor, Eric reflects on his father's hypocrisy, thinking he's sick of putting up with his nonsense. In a terrifying memory, a woman begs to be let go as Eric, his head bloodied, pleads not to be sent back to the basement for re-education. A distraught man recalls his terror of that horrible place. With a bleeding gash on his forehead, Eric glares defiantly, screaming that he can't go back in there. A woman with red hair asks a bruised, red-haired woman named Emily, who is cowering on the floor, if she intends to keep acting this way. The woman lifts Emily's chin, reminding her the wedding is in 2 days, and questioning how she can maintain her act. Crushing a doll, the woman violently grabs Emily's face, threatening that both she and her younger brother will disappear if she fails to fool the right people. She smiles cruelly, ordering Emily to forget her past and become the perfect Belriar. Remembering her happy younger brother, a determined Emily agrees, promising she will never be found out for his sake. Pleased, the woman praises her spirit, saying she's finally starting to please her. Holding her hands gently, the woman encourages Emily to try again, reminding her that she is the star of the wedding. The scene shifts to the magnificent residence of Grand Duke Artium as a voice notes the wedding is the day after tomorrow. Roz sits on a couch, clarifying that she isn't asking for the wedding to be stopped. A blonde man sitting opposite her looks up thoughtfully, questioning if it's thanks to her. Roz explains she came seeking information, prompting him to ponder the name Belriar. The man reveals the bride is the Marquis of Descartes' beloved, reclusive youngest daughter. He then admits he knows nothing more, leaving Ross stunned. A montage reveals that the Marquis keeps his daughter hidden from the public, so Ross realizes she's never had a proper conversation with her either. With her arms crossed, Ross decides something feels off and resolves to investigate in person. The blonde man leans in with an intrigued smile. He asks what she means by her visit, assuming she had another request for him. The man states that while they've exchanged terms by letter, he will provide the specifics upon his return. Roz strikes a confident pose, assuring her investor, the Grand Duke, that she won't disappoint him. Leaving his estate, she feels drained, thinking their brief talk went on for a strangely long time. She reflects on how Gwen's help resolved many troublesome issues as an aide presents her with a massive stack of documents. Realizing the time, she hurries off, determined to get back before it's too late. Rushing along, she collides with a dark-haired man and cries out in shock, recognizing Cern. Cerny greets her warmly, surprised by the encounter, and asks if she is hurt. She smiles brightly, reassuring him that she is fine thanks to his quick catch. Relieved, Cern offers to escort her home as an apology for the collision. As they walk toward a mansion at sunset, he admits he didn't expect her to be so happy to see him. Ross insists she is, but Cern soberly points out she left with only a letter behind. Looking away sheepishly, she apologizes and explains that grim circumstances forced her to leave in a hurry. She asks about Jane, expressing her worry that he and the maid have grown distant, causing Serene to flinch. He looks away, realizing with dismay that Jane has not yet told Ross he is one of Cedric's subordinates. As they continue walking, he silently admits to himself that he has wronged Jane. Ross explains that Jane isn't ready to see her yet, so she's simply waiting for her to come around. She gives Serene a friendly pat on the shoulder. Touched, Serene thinks to himself how kind his madam truly is. Roz mentions she hoped to see Jane at Eric's wedding, shocking Serene with the revelation that she already knew. She correctly guesses he kept it secret out of concern for her feelings, but waves it off, insisting she doesn't care about Eric's remarriage. In a dark flashback, a terrorized Eric remembers a bloody room, thinking that to him, that place was hell. In a quiet library, a soothing voice tells Eric that it's all right. Eric's mother, Tertia, comforts him, saying he knows how his father fusses over everything. Eric rests his head in her lap as she reflects that while Cedric may have acted out of affection, he went too far. She apologizes for his bandaged hand, but he insists it was his own fault for getting startled and stepping in. Tertia gently cups his face, encouraging him not to let his father's actions get him down. She reassures him that no matter what happens, he is the proud son of Count Wentz. With a confident smile, Tertia promises to handle his father and tells Eric to focus only on the upcoming wedding, declaring that is all that matters to her. In a lavish room, a voice from off-screen announces a solution to the seating arrangement. Ross internally fumes, recalling Gwen and Doanna's cruelty and wishing she could march into the wedding to mock Doanna. She admits to herself that despite trying to forget, she can't let go of her regrets, as the blonde man watches her with concern. He notices her lack of focus and asks if she's all right, but she quickly dismisses his concern. Taking her hand, he correctly guesses that her ex-husband's wedding is bothering her, which she confirms. She confesses it's not love for Eric, but a shameful desire to see Doanna's misfortune to ease her own bitterness. The blonde man grabs her arm, startling her as he insists that she absolutely must go to the wedding. Ross stares at him, completely taken aback by his sudden, forceful declaration. He tells her they'd better hurry if they're going to make a stop on the way, leaving her to ask, "What?" At a magnificent boutique, a woman with brown hair bows and welcomes Your Grace. Awed by the opulent shop, Ross whispers that she can't believe such a place exists. The blonde man leans close to Ross, causing her to blush and pull back slightly. An assistant asks if they should prepare his companion, but Ross interrupts, asking if she can be ready in 30 minutes. The assistant smiles apologetically, explaining that with hair and makeup, it's impossible. They'll need at least 2 hours. Roz realizes with a sigh that the timeline is far too tight. Boom! A flash of energy explodes behind the two stunned assistants. As the blonde man steps forward, the lead assistant composes herself and asks them to follow her this way. Roz worries aloud about rumors spreading, but the Grand Duke calmly states he's already used to people whispering about him. He places a hand on her arm, gently telling her that she is the one he's worried for. Roz looks down, touched by his sincere concern for her. Tap, tap, a pair of heels approach as a voice asks, "My lady?" 3 determined stylists appear, announcing they understand the situation and will prepare her perfectly. An assistant whisks a surprised Ross away as the Grand Duke waves, promising to see her shortly. The scene shifts to a dozen years ago at the Serviat estate. A younger, serious-looking blonde boy walks ahead of a young Roz. He tells the young Roz to stop following him, but she immediately asks why not. The boy warns her that staying close to him will only lead to scandalous rumors about her. Declaring that she doesn't mind, young Ross places a flower crown on his head. She sweetly explains that rumors don't matter because, more than anything, she just doesn't want him to be lonely. Back in the present, the Grand Duke stands dressed in his formal attire. Kia, the boutique assistant, clasps her cheeks, squealing with delight. She gushes that he looks absolutely perfect, and he graciously thanks her for the hard work. The assistant pulls back a red curtain, announcing that the lady is ready as well. As the Grand Duke reaches for the curtain, the assistant asks if he would like to see her. He looks on with a captivated smile as Ross is revealed in a stunning white gown, thinking, seriously. At the wedding venue, guests arrive by carriage to the grand estate. Two noblewomen gossip that the scale of this wedding far surpasses that of the first wife's. One of the women gasps, pointing toward the entrance in shock. The guests murmur as Grand Duke Artyom makes his entrance, noting with surprise that he hasn't come alone. Accompanied by the Grand Duke, Roz makes a stunning entrance, prompting a guest to shout her name in disbelief. The crowd buzzes, questioning why the divorced Roz is at the wedding with the Grand Duke, who is on bad terms with House Wens. In her bridal suite, Joanna reacts to the shocking news that Ross's arrival is about to send ripples through society.